With a quorum of members present, I'll call the Capital Improvements Program Committee to order. Today is Thursday, July 20th, 2023. We have a full quorum present today. Today is the session where we go through the ranking and scoring that we've done of all of the projects that were presented to us in the last two meetings, analyze our funding sources, and figure out what projects we can move forward for the Finance Committee to include in the 2024 budget. So kind of a big day for us. So you have the list in front of you that Emily gave us before the meeting began. And so I don't know if, Emily, do you want to walk us through a little bit about where we stack up with the requests, the borrowing, and the alternate fund sources, or?
Well, it's still pretty early.
Okay.
I think Mary Ann, she's planning on coming here. I know she was looking at it yesterday. She was doing
Okay.
some planning. But I think there are some opportunities. So like the fleet facility, we could definitely do like a separate borrowing for that. That might be something we would do in addition to the normal.
Right, which is what we did on Firehouse number 2, so that
Correct.
makes some sense.
Yep. And I think there's some things like the airport master plan, that funding, we would need to, it's a little bit like the metro. You'd have to promise it, have it available, but you wouldn't actually need that cash until the following year.
Right, right. So we would just need the municipal commitment, and so much of that is FAA funding. I mean, all of the airport projects get so much that our share is tiny. So it looks like, and obviously we don't rank things like park rolling stock, motor pool, and infrastructure. Those things have their own funding sources, cyclical funding sources. And so when we look at it, though, typically between the tax levy and the debt issue that we normally do, we normally fund just over $3.5 million in capital projects. The shortfall illustrated this year based on all of the projects that have been submitted, including the things that we don't score and the fleet facility, puts us at a shortfall of just over $2.8 million. With the fleet facility at $2 million of that, it looks like we're actually doing pretty good fund-wise. I mean, as far as within our normal fund sources and our cyclical funds and matching grants. And so, where we draw the line this year, we typically I think we'll be in a better position this year than we were last year, where we were at the red line before we began.
Right.
So.
And Andy brought up a great point this morning that there was some room tax dollars awarded for the River's Edge Trail.
Yes.
So that-
Yep, and that was 500,000, correct?
That's a lot.
I think River Edge Trail Extension was at 500,000 on here. So yes, room tax did elevate that project for funding as well. And Finance Director is here. We just started with just a overview, a kind of where we're at with the capital project requests, where we would be at with the borrowing and the levy, and our shortfall of 2.8 million. And we were just talking about the fleet facility being a separate bond issue or funding financing process anyway.
Yep.
So that it would appear that we're in a better position than we were last year, where we were at the red line before we even got off the launch pad.
Well,
So,
yeah.
go ahead, Mary.
Except for the debt issuance really needs to just fund streets.
Right?
So really, you only have like 560,000
Okay,
to use for these projects. But to your point, the River Edge Trail extension will be paid for out of room tax. The other thing is the 400 block site updates could be paid out of the 400 block fund because there is funding in there.
correct. And then we've got the alternate financing or separate financing on the 2 million for the
Right.
fleet facility.
Correct. So I think your line is about, give or take, at the 215,000 for the police tower.
For the cooling tower,
Yeah, that's where you would be, not very far.
if we add them up, okay.
Plus the River Edge Trail and the bollards for the 400 block.
Right. And so that would leave us, let's just look at the projects then that would be under the line. That would put us, so let's just, that would leave off tentatively the concrete work and coin handling equipment at Metro Ride. the public safety building roof replacement, the athletic park wall cap repairs, the council chamber video and room upgrade, the LED lighting upgrades at DPW, the Sylvan Hill parking lot, the playground equipment replacement year one, parking lot security improvements at the PD,
All of that.
Riverside Park parking lot, the long-term needs assessment study for the police department, office repairs to the or the DPW streets offices, and the land acquisition for Firehouse number 1. Now, that said, a number of these, I mean, just based on where these projects scored and what we heard from within the departments, a lot of these things are not at condition critical. The one that, the finance committee may need to take a look at is that land acquisition for Station 1. That also was submitted for ARPA. And the deciding on how to fund that, I mean, I think they recognize the need for it, but then picking a fund source for it, they ended up putting a pin in it for ARPA funding to analyze other funding mechanisms. That might be something that they're going to have some frank conversations about if we don't move that up, because, that need isn't going away. The other thing that I would have a question about is, because that the phased implementation of the roof at public safety, that's a multi-year project because the roof has multiple elevations. Do they feel that we could get a couple more years out of that without starting immediately? And so the items above the line would be the airport master plan, the fleet facility, the runway reconstruction, paratransit bus replacement, taxiway rehab signage and lights at the airport, the bunk room dividers for Firehouse 1 and 3, the cooling tower at the police department, the turnout gear washer, extractor, and dryer for Station 3, the asset management software for IT, the additional enhancements for Workday, the roof replacement at Firehouse 3. Is that where where do we stop the line here?
Right at 215.
Okay, 215, so that's the cooling tower. So then we don't get to move up the turnout washer and the, okay. Let's see, that's 48.5. I don't know, what are your thoughts, committee? I do have some concerns about not moving up the turnout wash equipment for Station 3 just because of the logistics of transporting that gear across town to clean it.
I do think in the, we have the central equipment replacement fund.
Yes.
It has accumulated some reserves, and this really is, kind of.
It's that, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, I could evaluate that, and we could do a budget mod.
Yeah.
For, and really then they would be able to replace it this year.
Yeah.
As well.
Yep,
So we can look at that.
yeah. It did sound like, now the roof at Station Firehouse 3 was not at condition critical, was it? I mean, it's high priority, but it wasn't marked critical by the maintenance.
Oh, Bob is coming.
Here comes Fire Chief. Welcome.
Morning, good morning. Unfortunately, that roof at Station 3 has to be replaced. It's currently leaking.
Oh,
We
okay.
kicked it, we thought we'd get another year out of it, and we were wrong after the winter. We've got a lot of ice damming and other issues that occurs on that roof and design, and so we were up on it this spring. We had contractors up on it this spring. Unfortunately, we have to do that, and it may be at the expense of the extractor dryer project or something like that in order to move those funds over there. So, it needs to be done.
Okay. And we determined we do not have a 2022 surplus that we can
Right.
recommend that finance use on that.
So one of the things I was talking to Emily about last night was, it takes a long time with these state projects, the airport projects, to actually, have them draw down our local share on these projects.
Yes.
And so I wonder if, we could fund a portion of that in 2024 and a portion in 2023.
That would make some sense. What we've been finding in the airport committee is that the process to move all of that forward has been painfully slow. Even the work that they wanted to do on the terminal, projects that we had approved a year or two ago are still in planning and progress because that funding, the release from the federal agencies has been painstakingly slow.
Right.
So, I mean, if we could even get a year on that, we could actually commit to the project,
Right.
which would put an earmark in the future budget for
Right.
it. And then we could then, in that lag time, maybe bring up a couple extra projects.
Right, so if you took, if you took one of those projects and just funded 50% of it, let's say in '24 and 50% in '25, you would be able to bring, the roof up.
Yeah, which is, well, the runway reconstruction is 165.
Right.
That gets us about to the roof and the turnout gear, right?
Yes.
So
Do that.
the turnout washer. Okay. Now, on the Workday additional enhancements, knowing that the Workday implementation has been aggressively timed and it's been a ton of work within the departments, are we ready for those enhancements, or is that something that we should be waiting on just based on logistics?
I think we would be ready.
Okay. It's been a lot for everyone here. That's why I wondered if, is it something that we need to make it work the rest of the way, or do we need a breather between?
I can take a look at that.
Well, and yeah,
Because we have money in a number of CCITC capital projects, and evaluate if there's any money left over in any of those projects. to
right.
get it
Well,
moving
even from the
forward.
original funding for Workday, right? Was there any, if there's any left?
I know
or-
we did go through that.
Okay.
I'm thinking of, like, the law enforcement software. That's been 5 or 6 years, I think.
Okay.
So.
And they have it now, right? So that project is pretty much done?
Right. I think they've been fighting over something with the vendor. Can't remember the exact details on it, but
Okay.
it seemed like we had a big chunk left.
Okay. So if that's something that we could check on, to see where we're at with other IT project surplus, to see if we could get enough to get the Workday enhancements on.
Okay.
Because then if we come out that way, we would commit to the airport master plan, the fleet facility, the runway reconstruction, the paratransit bus, the taxiway rehab, the bunk room dividers, the cooling tower, the turnout gear, wash equipment, the roof replacement at Station 3. We'll try to get the Workday enhancements. The River Edge Trail extension has room tax, and the safety bollards at the 400 block we'd be able to get. And so that does put us in a little better spot. Would we want to, I guess, why don't we discuss that, where we're at, and see if, are you guys, as a committee, are you satisfied with that spot on the list, Michael?
With the airport stuff, I'm just looking at the future years. And it does appear like there's not going to be a large request in 2025, although they're planning in 2026
A big one.
a bigger ask. So if we have to make the commitment for 2024, would this be the best opportunity to make that commitment and then split the need or split the funding over 2 cycles to kind of bolster that fund, just so that we don't have so much pain up front?
On the runway project?
On the run, yeah, it's specifically the runway project, because that's the biggest of the 3 for this year, so.
What are your thoughts, Marianne?
Isn't that what you were proposing? No?
Well, right,
Yeah.
half for '24 and
Yep.
half for '25, right?
Yeah. I think that
which
would be fine.
Which would put us to about 82,000 per year,
Yeah.
82, 83, somewhere in there. And just thin it out a little bit, especially if they have nothing in,
And there's a larger ask in 2026 then for the runway project, or is that?
well, the first one is the planning and design, and I think
Planning.
the other one is the actual building
Yeah,
of
okay.
it. But they'll have FAA funding for both portions. We'll just have a local match.
Yeah. But if it's not, if it doesn't seem that like it's like the project is gonna happen next year, then we can work through the funding over two cycles so that the money
Yes.
will be there when they're ready to break ground.
Yes.
Yep.
They've been working through funding and grant funding and funding in general, requests with the FAA and with the Bureau for most of this year, just to get the terminal upgrades that were approved quite some time ago. And, there's a number of other projects that they have in the hopper that have just been, what we heard in the airport committee was that within the approval agencies, the federal agencies, they've actually been willing to even issue guarantees that the federal share of the funding is there if we commit to the projects, but the process they use to release those funds has been hamstrung by things like staffing shortages and retirements and new staff coming on and, things like that, where there's been a different decision matrix versus tenured employees that were on for quite some time that were more confident in pulling the trigger and sending the funds out the door. So it sounds like that's working through, but it's been painful for airports
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah.
So, okay. So what are your thoughts, committee, if we move up those projects? Andy, come on up.
Don't mean to interrupt.
No,
first
go
time
ahead.
CIP here. It was mentioned a couple times. I just wanted to be clear on the room tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
It was $100,000 was assigned to this section of trail, or up to $100,000 to make up any shortfall in the CIP
Okay,
allocation. So you can go down to 400,000, and then we would get the full 100,000 from the room tax. That would take us up to 5. So
okay.
just wanted to.
Remind me what section this is?
This is the section south of Thomas around the DPW site.
Okay. So that is 400,000 that we don't have in this decision matrix. I mean, and that's, assuming, and we're using our, we had scored these projects, assuming that we may be able to get a little more done since there's been an upgrade to shared revenue, but obviously those funds aren't here yet. The borrowing that we've projected is what we've always borrowed, though. So the shortfall that we see doesn't reflect any increase in things like that.
Right.
So, I mean, we've taken a rather conservative approach, but Ed, did you have a comment on the list, or?
I
Go ahead.
do. I've got a couple comments, and I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes, but the project that, a couple of them that concern me quite a bit, the fencing for the police department. Last year, that was before us, and last year I didn't score it very high, because I just figured that we're in Wisconsin, and we're not going to get quite that concerned. However, if you take a look at City Hall, and you walk down by the offices, we have all these windows that we've put up over the years. When I first moved here in '95, there were no windows. And it wasn't until recently that we had windows. People would just walk up and talk to you, particularly Gary Klingbeil in my case.
Oh, secure entry, you mean?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
not secure entry, right on the front
Oh,
line.
the service window.
The
Okay, I
interior
see.
windows. I'm
Yep,
sorry,
yep.
I apologize. Okay. So things have changed. We're now seeing on the news almost daily where law enforcement officers are being ambushed, or firefighters are being ambushed, or any one of a number of things. If somebody can do exactly what the chief has talked about, kind of drive through that parking lot down there and film the license plate numbers of every car there. If they've got the thought process to do that, I wouldn't be surprised they probably couldn't get somebody to tell them who owns that vehicle. And then are we adding exposure to our law enforcement officers because all of a sudden they've got the address? And in this day and age, I can tell you, the more you read, the more you find out it started years ago, but it's gotten worse, where, you know, you just pull a root, as it's called by some gangs, and they just go in and kill the law enforcement officer's entire family. I think for the security of our law enforcement officers, I think for security of the people that do business down there, it is probably a item that should be rated much higher than it is. And I might even suggest, I'm not a member of the council, but we used to have an emergency fund, and I might even suggest that if we've got the ability to grab that and use it, maybe that would be the right thing to do. I just think that we are putting our law enforcement officers at an endangered place that they don't deserve to be at, and potentially their families. And I know most of you in this room, and I can tell you that it would devastate almost any of you that I know here if something actually happened,
Yeah.
you know? So, and then the lawsuits that potentially could result over it, I don't know how that would work out, but it probably could easily pay for the fence on any kind of a win. We haven't got all the way through this thing, but one of the things that bothers me is the Station 1 land acquisition. Station 1 land acquisition, first of all, I'd like to say something. I have no doubt in my mind, Station 1 needs to be replaced. And down the road, Station 3 needs to be looked at too. And when I say down the road, the guys who are qualified there are the best ones to make that recommendation, whenever it is. The issue for me with Station 1 is where they want to go does not, $815,000 does not really begin to show the cost of that land acquisition. And the reason I say that is if you go over there and look, if you want to go south on Grand Avenue, you got to go out to Thomas, turn left, go through a signal and turn left again. I talked to Eric not too long ago and asked about cutting a opening into the medium there. And he informed me that we can't do that because that whole intersection is controlled by the state of Wisconsin, not us. And he doubts that they would allow that because it's an alternate route for 52, is what I believe he told me. So I appreciate what the deputy chief did in showing us some opportunities to bypass the additional acquisition of property on maybe the placement of that station. But I have a large, I don't have large, I have a standard half-ton pickup sitting right out the door here, and I've driven that area, the street and everything, alleyways and everything else, several times at night and in the daytime, and I've had difficulty with my truck. Now, you take a look at that truck and you take a look at every truck that's used to fight fires, there are some potential issues there that are a challenge. The next issue that I'd like to comment on is moving the DPW building from where it's currently at up to another location. And the other location certainly provides opportunity to be clean and start over and maybe accomplish some things. But we have electrical services at the current location you can't get anymore. They just, the endangerment of those things. So when you look at buying that piece of property, and then you look at building, I have no doubt that you all will, members of the council will bring this in right on target. Don't have any issue with that. But what about the old DPW property? We're going to have to remediate that. Okay?
Well, the
Some-
plan, though.
Let me finish
Okay.
just a second.
All right.
Well, and that's an additional added cost that's not reflected here. And yes, it could come in different years, but I just think that needs to be concerned. I understand I'm a little off topic on this, but I'm concerned as a taxpayer and as a person who has worked in businesses that I had to watch my P's and Q's money-wise for projects, and I got myself in trouble a couple times because I didn't lock it all in. So, thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Sure. I think just for clarification, though, the SISM committee, when it analyzed the site selection for that DPW facility, it's not a complete relocation of DPW. It's only the construction of a fleet facility for vehicle maintenance and maintenance work. So DPW isn't leaving Myron Street. Their offices, their storage, there's, a lot of that stuff is still, they'll still own the site in parity with the wastewater facility. So it wasn't like they would completely vacate and then sell it like they're doing with the water plant. So, if they retain that facility and it still continues to have usefulness, what they don't have room for and what they've had trouble with is the fleet mechanics and first having workspace for enough mechanics to do the work, and then having a facility that's conducive to work on the size of vehicles that our fleet has grown to get them in and then be able to work around them. So the new facility isn't a complete pick up and move of DPW. So, I mean, we should be okay on that. I mean, there was a number of sites that were considered, is some better and worse than others. This one was one of the best fits. We looked at an expansion of their current site, but without buying homes that, maybe aren't even for sale. There's no way to expand the footprint that they occupy on Myron Street. So then we started to look for other sites. And then we had some fights about some sites, and then this is the one that we emerged on that they all could agree on. So that's how we got to the site selection for that portion of their operation. So knowing that the land acquisition for Station 1 was at the bottom of the list and sits in a holding pattern, do we have any options on that fence, I guess, is, where we, Carrie?
I don't mean to sound anti-police at all through this, but the safety concern, I agree. But the bollards at the corner block are also, what if somebody plowed through, if we're gonna talk lawsuits, that throws a whole bunch of these out there. You can't unilaterally decide that, there's safety concerns all over the place.
Right, and we had funded the fence last year, and then with the inflation of labor and materials, came to find out that what we had approved and allocated wasn't even close. So they were able to get some other work done within the department with the funds that we had allocated. So they'd be starting from scratch for funding on this. It isn't like they have this year's money that didn't get used and then, so I think that's something we have. I agree, it's something we have to look at. The finance committee has some options that we don't have because they'll have the luxury of knowing a little more about what the revenue picture looks like because they'll be doing this 2 months from now. They're part of it. They have the option to move some things around. They can look at savings from projects that are currently in progress that may be complete by October, by the time that they're done. They may know a little more about what the shared revenue picture looks like. They also have the option to increase their borrowing, even though that's not a popular choice. That's within their discretion as well. So, depending on what you decide you want to move forward, if you wanted to move forward the projects that we talked about, and then, take that fence and with our recommendation, strongly urge them to include it, knowing today that it's an unfunded project. Let them see if they can find funding for it, I guess. If they can't,
I
then.
agree, but it's why not do that for all the rest of the things on the list?
And it did score
That's-
low.
That's right.
It
though,
did
that's-
score low. It scored higher last year.
I think that's why we have
Well, and that-
council in a group, so,
Yeah.
because we all have different opinions on
Right,
what's important and.
true. And that is kind of what happens with the rest of the list, because if they come out with a successful year where there's, more money and savings than they figure, the first thing they can do is go back to the list and see what other work they could accomplish that, we weren't able to fund here. We could leave it where it's at on the list, forward the list that we know we can pay for. And then, obviously, it's their default in finance is to maximize the amount of work they can do with the money they have. So they certainly, I think, and I chair finance, so I certainly, and through the budget workshops, could encourage them to review the list that didn't qualify and the scores associated therewith, and we could certainly have that discussion about fencing and land acquisition and things. They've not spent the rest of their ARPA money, but they're about out of that. That's running low. So if we would choose to leave the fence where it's at, we'd still get a decent amount of projects. Gary, did you have thoughts on this?
Well, not specific, when you move off the fence discussion, I have some general comments.
go ahead.
With regard to, well, I agree with Mr. Gale. I think where are we exactly with fire station number 1? I agree that lot, where the intended place is awkward. The city owns I think we own that whole block, that the police department is going to be looking for administration offices and enlargement. I think we really have to take a look and see how the city of Wausau can fit, the potential of a new fire station. In addition to the new police facility, I think we just really need, and that's why down on Thomas Street, not that we need to buy social services, but Marathon County Social Services is not there anymore. There's a variety of other properties I think that we can, so I just wonder where we are with the decision with regard to
Right.
number 1.
Well, and whether or not I don't know that we've done a, full-on feasibility study for that site. I mean, we've kind of eyeballed that site because it's close to where they're at, and, one thing, when we built Station 2, they had to work to fit what they were trying to build onto the land they already owned. I mean, we got that land from the state with the intent that we use it for a public purpose, but it took some, I would say, gear grinding to get what they put there to fit at the angle that it sits, to maximize that strip of land, because they didn't own anything behind it, and they were confined, and so maybe we need to do some research on that site to determine if it's indeed the best site. I mean, if you had that site, and then they had talked about maybe buying up a couple of adjacent homes, well, you never know if or when those come up for sale, but if they do, do you exit onto the Thomas Street side? Do you exit onto the Grand Avenue side? I mean, how stuff sits, I think, would matter for, the stuff entering and exiting. If there's no way to modify the Grand and Thomas intersection to gain access through that median, which includes a turn lane, that could be hugely problematic. And you hate to own a piece of land then that you can't sell, you can't repurpose, you have no use for, because your planned use didn't quite pan out. So, I mean, that could be problematic.
And we own a large parking, not this is an issue, but we own the whole parking lot. I know that parking would go away for a little bit, but we own that whole block. So where does a new I'm not a planner, I don't know, but I'm just trying to look for some kind of alternatives for potentially a new fire station. But I think that the Floral property is awkward, to say the least. But anyways, that's just how I feel.
It could be.
And just with regard to, and I just want to say that the parking lot at Riverside Park is an embarrassment to the city of Wausau. I mean, if people coming down there, I think we just have to take a look, at some of these things that really do need a quick look at. I know it's ranked low, but, some of these, I think we have to take a look at some of these and see how we can do better with regard to this. And I know we don't have money, but even if we have to borrow a little bit more, I think, so that some of these things don't become, and I'll be saying it on other venues, but our streets and roads, and that's not an issue for today, but at least some of our parking lots, I think, can be dealt with here. And I think it just needs, we just really need to think about how the city's starting to look, especially with some of our parking lots.
I
Yep.
have one more quick thing.
No, go ahead.
I know down at the bottom of the list is the police department facility needs assessment. I think that's really important. That's everything that you just said. Like, we have, that's the info gathering and the planning, correct?
Yep.
I mean, that's down at the bottom of the list, but it's fairly important for anything we're gonna do in the future.
It is, you know, and not knowing where we fall with some of these other revenue sources, it's difficult for us to pick stuff off the bottom of the list and move it up, because the stuff that we would have to erase to get it in is stuff that's scored higher, that's actually more needed or worse. So, you know, I think that, you know, obviously this entire list will go to finance with the line drawn. But, you know, I certainly can emphasize to them when we get there that, you know, just because a couple of these projects are down the list doesn't mean that they are or shouldn't be considered a priority.
What I was talking to with Emily before this started is the questions, I think, are wonky on our score sheet. I mean, there are things that are scoring low for a question that doesn't really matter for that one because it's the same questions pretty much for each thing. So I don't know. I think I think the questions can kind of skew what's really happening.
There's an
The way
opportunity,
they're worded.
I agree, I think there's an opportunity for every project on here to score 0 in some category, but to score 10 in others, you know? And that does kind of level the playing field, because while there's one project that may not have any environmental impact, it may have a critical safety impact, or it may have a huge cost of delay. So, you know, I think when we balance out the score sheet, even though all of the projects almost never meet all of the criteria, even to earn full points, they meet enough of them that I think we get where we're trying to go. So if we were looking at, I mean, would we want to look at one more meeting to finalize our list once they go over these additional finance? I mean, if Mary Ann wants to take a look at the IT projects that we have in progress and see if there's any left to incorporate Workday, if we want to look at the equipment replacement fund for the turnout gear, I mean, do we want to reconvene one more time to know that, to get a final list?
We are, you know, ahead of
We are a few weeks ahead of
past
schedule.
year's schedules.
Yeah, we are.
So we definitely would have time to do that if you'd like to do that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, even if we wanted to pick a day next week, it doesn't have to drag on forever. Would we be able to, or,
I don't, next week Emily's gone, the following week I'm gone.
okay,
So it'll be at least 2 weeks.
okay. Okay, why don't we do that? Do we want to do that then, planned for, let me just bring up a calendar here. That puts us to the week of the August 7th to the 11th. If we could find is that the week you're talking about reconvening?
Yeah, that would be the earliest. So
Okay.
if we wanted to move it to the following week, that would give us a little more time to get our homework done.
I may or may not be here, but I don't need to be here.
Okay. Do we prefer,
Would you be here the week before?
I don't know, I'm doing something before school starts in
Okay.
August.
You don't know yet?
My
Okay.
family, I just don't know where that's.
right, sure. And I guess tentatively, we could try to plan, does Thursday morning work for everybody? I mean, if like the time that we're in right now, okay. Because, you know, tentatively,
Sorry for that.
if we would shoot for like August 17th, that's, you know, 3 Thursdays from now.
Yeah, for a Thursday morning, August 17th won't work for me.
It won't?
I'm already committed that day.
Okay,
But any other day of the week.
okay. Yep, and I can't do the Wednesday, but the rest of the week is good for me.
I think we have to stick to the 8 to 10 time block.
The 8 to 10
This room
time
is
block,
available.
well, right, to make sure that we're not
If we're gonna do
interfering with other
Thursday.
stuff in this room.
Yep.
Fridays also are typically quiet in this room, right? So what about the 18th Friday? If we did 8 AM? Would that tentatively, I mean,
Yeah, I could make that work.
I would expect that would probably be a 30-minute meeting. I mean, because we'll have most of the number crunching will be done. We'll know kind of where we're at with our red line, what we're, you know, they'll produce a list that moves the things up and down that we've talked about.
If I'm somewhere else, can I call them?
Yeah. Yep.
Just for my reference, where's the red line right now again?
It started out at the 215 at the cooling tower.
Okay.
And then we decided to split the airport project, so we're able to get the extractor and the roof at Station 3. And then the bollards at the 400 block. We're not able to do the River Edge Trail extension or the tennis court.
No, okay.
So, and then let me see, the other things that were left behind, asset management software wasn't getting funded, right? So then,
Yeah.
and the north end, the roof at Myron Street, that wasn't even in there either. So it would get us the roof at Fire Station number 3, possibly the workday enhancements if we have surplus from the other project, the turnout gear, the 400 block bollards, and then everything above the 215. But then the rest of it would wait.
Okay, so that's like, kind of like the
Yeah, so we'd have.
gray area. I got you.
Couple of promotions there, but then otherwise pretty much the way we scored it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gary.
Is this the committee that, what about, I want to address the issue of the borrowing limit. You know, we set that line, but what about moving that line further south so that we can indeed borrow? Because some of these things that really are, you know, and we've had that limit for years, and I get that. But, you know, some of these issues are really important, and I think I can go back to my constituents and say, yes, we're borrowing, but these are good things that the city needs to deal with. I don't know if that discussion happens here or in finance.
In
I don't know.
finance, I agree, I could make the same argument in my district. I think there's other districts that cannot or would not. So, you know, I don't know how we'd come out on that, but I think the finance committee ultimately decides how much debt it wants to issue.
I think the other issue is, you know, our costs for reconstruction of streets has gone up, you know,
Horribly.
yeah, in the last year or two due to oil prices, due to cost of employees, pipe, all of those things. So, you know, we're having to borrow more just to maintain the number of street replacements. And we have been, you know, trying to fund streets out of our tax increment districts. So like 17th Avenue is being funded out of a TID district. TID 8 also is doing some concrete and asphalt restoration work. So we have tried to utilize our TIDs as much as possible
Right,
for
to
those
help
types
with
of
funding
projects.
there,
Mhm.
yeah.
in the half-mile boundary. And I think it's doing next year 7th Avenue or a different, I can't remember what street it is, but something else in TID 8.
Okay.
No, I sympathize, and I understand, you know, but when I look at some of these things, I think, really,
Sure.
can we wait? And I know that there are some very good projects that fall south of the line, but maybe that's just so that maybe that discussion maybe gets to finance and let them deal with it. I guess we have other issues here.
Yep, well, and in finance, we'll host at least 3, maybe 4, but at least 3 budget workshops. And so when we do the budget workshop, they're broadcast like normal open meetings, and we invite the entire council to join us in the budget workshop. So if there's stuff that anybody specifically wants to see in or out, up or down, we have those conversations there, so that when the budget arrives on the council floor for public hearing, that it's a product that we all understand how we got there. So we'll certainly make sure to continue also to invite everyone to that, so we can all be part of that conversation. So why don't we then plan for that next session? Hopefully our last session then would be August 18th at 8 a.m. That's a Friday morning. If we find that that date won't work, either for some of us or for the room, we can send out an email. But tentatively, let's just kind of shoot for that. And we'll let them go back to the math part of this and see what they can find for us in terms of alternative funding that could maybe move some of this stuff up that we want to prioritize. Anyone else have additional comments on this particular list? Okay. If not, we'll continue this work, and then we will reconvene and see where we end up at our final session, then August 18th. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Who was our first? Mike? Gary? Mike? Okay. All right. Motion from Martin, second by Marl. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No one's ever opposed to adjournment. We'll see you in a month, everyone. Thank you.